Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. And today, do I have a real weird one for you? It is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to talk about some short form literature that intrigued me as I was reading it more and more. It is a story about time travel, among other things. I am referring to All You Zombies by Robert Heinlein, which was published in 1959. For those who don't know, Robert Heinlein is a science fiction writer and engineer of sorts. So in addition to knowing about science fiction, he also knows a little bit of the science behind it. But he's a science fiction writer known as one of the big deals in science fiction, along with Asimov, that guy who wrote I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream. I'll put the name up there because I'm forgetting it. And Philip K. Dick, all those people, very well known in science fiction, and I feel that Robert Heinlein is up there as well. He also wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, which I have heard about, but I have not read, and Starship Troopers, which I watched the movie, but I have not read the book. But I am, it's probably on my TBR eventually, in order to read the book because, it's a pretty big deal in science fiction. And also, I only just recently learned it was a book, and I think some of my friends recommended I don't read it because it's not as good as the movie, but I still want to check it out just because what I read here is very intriguing, and I want to see more of Heinlein's work, which I'll probably talk about down the road. But yeah, Robert Heinlein is regarded as one of the big voices in science fiction, having written short stories and books and given various talks, respected among his peers. Although he was very liberal early on in his career, he developed a very conservative mindset later on, especially being for the war in Vietnam, which is unfortunate. He often wrote about individualism and collectivism and other philosophical ideas, which you see right here as well. So he's well regarded in the field of science fiction. But without further ado, let's talk about All You Zombies. I will do a summary, a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So All You Zombies focuses on mainly on a conversation that's taking place at a bar. A bartender who also identifies as a temporal agent meets a man who he refers to as the unmarried mother, which is a bit unclear because why would that man be an unmarried mother? The first part of the story, the very introduction, is a challenging read to try to identify what Heinlein is saying. But it all becomes clear later on, especially as the man begins telling his life story. He talks about how he was an orphan and nobody wanted to adopt him. Also, he says that at one point he was at that point in his life, he was a woman, and I'm choosing to use the term man here because that's how he's identified in the story, and also because he says he's a man now, and so I'm just using correct pronouns at that point. But yeah, he was an orphan. Nobody wanted to adopt little girls like that, and so as a little girl at the time, he realized that the only way to rise above his station in life was to join the Women's Space Service, often providing hospitality to men in space who needed to relieve tension in some form or way, whether that be through what seems like sex or just hospitality in general, like a hostess of sorts. Once the man arrives back on Earth, he finds himself seduced by a rich man who flashes a lot of money in his direction. and they have a little bit of a relationship, but eventually the rich man leaves, and leaves the woman at the time pregnant, and she wants revenge because she was just left, and once she gives birth to the baby, it's discovered that the baby is kidnapped, presumably by this rich man who seemingly came back for the baby. And at the same time, the doctor lets the woman know that she had she had both sets of organs, and because of the baby, it completely ruined the female organs, and so they did not do a consented sex change operation. They just did a sex change operation, and now the man is a man as a result of that. And he became an author and seems to be very bitter about what happened in his life. And at this point, the bartender's like, okay, well, what if I offer to help you in exchange for you joining my organization as a favor? And the offer seems too good to be true, and the unmarried mother accepts this offer. And as a result, they go into a back room where they encounter a time machine, which they use to travel back in time. And the bartender hands the unmarried mother a stack of money to go off and find this person. In the process, time travel shenanigans ensue, where the temporal agent, while that is happening, they go back in time and forward in time as well, and steal the baby from the hospital, put it in the orphanage, and it becomes incredibly clear that what's going on is the temporal agent is basically creating the situation in which the unmarried mother is going to just seduce himself. And the baby that they're stealing is also the unmarried mother, who will be raised as Jane in this situation, or the young girl. Eventually the bartender returns back to the unmarried mother, the writer, and it's clear to the writer at this point that he was seducing himself, and that all of this has just been one sort of elaborate time paradox. And the unmarried mother agrees at this point to just become part of the temporal agency. So the bartender returns back to his present point in 1970, and gets the unmarried mother recruited, and everything goes well there. And then the bartender or temporal agent returns back to 1992 or 1993 and checks in and asks for a station change so that they can go into the field rather than recruiting people in the future. Or in the past. And from there, it's revealed that the bartender or the temporal agent is also the unmarried mother. That they have the scars from the cesarean when they were pregnant, and they essentially recruited people from their own. Time agency is essentially recruiting people from their own past and creating paradoxes which aren't really that big of a deal, because what will be, and what happens just happens. There's no real consequences to messing with time in this way. And as the story ends, the narrator notes, I know that I'm real, but what about all you zombies? I can't say the same for you. In terms of analysis, my first thought upon reading this story was, okay, what the hell? It's incredibly bizarre, but this is not the first time that I've heard of this idea. I actually heard of the paradox in this story long before I actually read it, because it seems to be a scientific trope that you would actually go back in time and mess with things so that you were somehow your own grandfather or your own father or your own mother or something like that, and something that seems like it should be impossible but actually isn't. It's like the Roswell episode of Futurama where Fry accidentally ends up being his own grandfather. Roswell That Ends Well, it's called, if you want to go out and find it. Really good episode. But one thing that Heinlein talks about is time travel and causality, because what really happens in the unmarried mother's life because if you follow the path, it gets complicated, because unmarried mother is an orphan. They grow up to be in the hospitality business. They meet a rich person, they get pregnant, they have a child, and they lose that child, they become an author, and then they end up at the bar. But that's not actually what happens for the unmarried mother, because there's so many different factors. Like the unmarried mother, if you follow it even back further, like the unmarried mother was a child like that was stolen from a hospital. And who was their mother? Who was the unmarried mother's mother? Like, well, that would be the unmarried mother when she was Jane. And who was the unmarried mother's father? Well, that would be the unmarried mother after the sex change. And you see that like it's a bit unclear of like what the source of everything is, because it's one big time loop. And it continues like even after the unmarried mother learns about time travel and becomes a temporal agent, because they go back in their own timeline, and it's one big self-contained kind of time loop, which I think is fascinating on Heinlein's part, because it's suggesting that there was no beginning or end or even origin of this person's life. They don't really seem to exist outside of this time loop, because there's no other factor in there. Like there's no other influence on their life. Like, where did any of this come from? It seems to generate a big paradox. Like, none of this should really be possible. But as one of the time agency kind of posters says in the story, like, any paradox can be paradoctored. So maybe paradoxes aren't real. Maybe this is just how time works, and you can make it do anything to your needs. I think that was also mentioned in the Futurama story, Roswell That Ends Well, where like Fry is his own grandfather now. You can't do anything about it, but it's certainly a weird implication there. And I do wonder, like, could further manipulation be done in this way? Like, could you go back in this already existing timeline and change a few things and then recruit that person? So you have an endless cycle of going into time loops and recruiting new people. And as long as you don't interfere with like the temporal agents or mess anything up like that, like you have a weird sort of complicated time loop where you have an endless cycle of people being recruited. And it's kind of bizarre, but it works according to Heinlein's logic. And even according to Carl Sagan, it works, because he praised this story for being consistent in its time travel. And like there's no like gap here. It's only just a giant paradox. And I also think it's important because Heinlein does consider the grander implications of all this, like the psychological effects of doing this kind of time travel. Like, it doesn't seem good for the bartender at the end of the story, who seems worn out by all of this. And he even has like a giant headache, which he says he usually doesn't take any like headache powder for, but it can't be good to constantly be going around like this and creating time paradoxes and seeing that you're manipulating your old self in that way. Like, that can't be fun for you. And indeed, like, for this specific temporal agent, it isn't. And I doubt it is for the other ones as well. It's just something that they have to live with for some reason. I don't know why exactly they're going back in time, but it's in an effort to prevent bad things from happening. And so the ultimate question is, like, who is real in this world? Is it only you? Because as the narrator says in this story, like, I know that I'm real. Like, I know that I exist. But what about all you zombies, as it says in the title? Like, who is real there? And I think that, like, what Heinlein is trying to say is that maybe all of this, like, we could all be part of the same temporal loop of just creating countless upon countless clones through time paradoxes. And so, like, you can't really guarantee that anyone is real or a factor of temporal manipulation or anything like that, which sounds ridiculous. But again, like, if you can only prove that you're real in this way, how can you prove that anyone else is real unless you've gone back in their time stream or anything like that? And it also raises a question of free will, Because does the narrator or does the bartender or the unmarried mother have any free will in this situation, since everything is being manipulated from the outside? Like, any decision that they make in this story is as a result of what happened in their past. And what happened in their past was manipulated by themselves. So maybe you could say that there's some free will, but also you can't, because again, it's like someone else is affecting that. Again, causality and time travel and the nature of free will, it's up to debate. If you think that there is free will as a result of this story, comment below. Let's have a discussion about that, because I think it's definitely worth discussing here. And then the only thing that I'd really complain about this story is it does seem more like a thought experiment than a short story. Like, the characters aren't too well developed. Like, we only know what happens in their time loop, their time stream, more than anything else. And it seems like a thought experiment designed to introduce these concepts of free will and time loops and paradoxes and causality. It's not bad. It's just there's not a lot of meat to the story as a whole beyond exploring all those ideas. It's not, the characters or the plot isn't as well developed as other short stories that I read, but it's still one of the best short stories that I have read, because the ideas that he plays around with are so good. Anyway, those are my thoughts on All You Zombies by Robert Heinlein. An amazing short story. I'd say probably one of the best that I read on this channel, especially one of the better science fiction short stories. And that's saying something, because I read Asimov and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and even Philip K. Dick. A lot of really good science fiction short stories on this channel, which have perfectly fit the theme of weirdness and all that. And I definitely recommend this short story for you out there. Even though I spoiled it, you will get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And it's just a really powerful short story. And I think one of the more foundational ideas through which modern science fiction has really been developed upon. Because anytime you hear about time travel in science fiction, this is something that is frequently talked about. So yeah, I definitely recommend this, especially to Lucas from the Bits of Lit. This is going to be a strong recommendation, as I'd love to hear his thoughts on it and see what he has said about it. Other than that, if you have something to say or you want to comment on my review or tell me what you thought of the story, do so below. Let's have a discussion about All You Zombies. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this story and this author if they don't already know. I have a feeling a lot of people who are interested in science fiction probably know who Heinlein is. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and time paradoxy travels. Farewell.